Uh, Prenatal care is a comprehensive antepartum program that involves a coordinated and complete medical care, as you can see here, and approach to medical care with continuous risk assessment and psychological support that optimally begins before pregnancy and extends throughout the postpartum and in the pregnancy period. There are manifestations or signs of pregnancy that you must be very familiar with. As you can see here, cessation of menstruation. If she has missed her period for 10 days from the expected period, then that's amenorrhea. For example, she was expecting her period by September 1 and September 15 has already come, or September 10 and she has not menstruated, that's amenorrhea. In a woman, particularly who has sexual activity, may be significant of a possible pregnancy. When you examine her lower genital tract, you will see the bluish discoloration of the vagina, which is called Chadwick's sign. You will feel that the consistency of the cervix is soft, like the consistency of your lips, and you will see a cervical mucus pattern. When you do a bimanual examination, you will see a softening of the isthmus, which is the narrowest portion of the uterus between the corpus and the cervix, and that is called the Heger signs, softening of the isthmus. And when you auscultate through the abdomen, you will feel this, you will hear this shuffle or the sound of blood passing through the placenta. When you look at the breast and the skin, there will be increased pigmentation, and that will make us suspect already. And of course, in a woman who is pregnant for the first time, she will perceive fetal movement at 18 to 20 weeks. But if she has had more than one children, she will palpate or feel fetal movements at 16 to 18 weeks. So please remember the signs, okay? Primigravida, 18 to 20 weeks, multipara, 16 to 18 weeks when they will feel their first fetal movement. If you get a little mucus from your cervix and draw it on a slide and dry it and look at it under the microscope, you see the effect of the form pattern. The form pattern is characteristic of an estrogen-dominated mucus, estrogen-rich mucus, while a beaded pattern is suggestive of a progesterone effect on the cervical mucus. So if the woman is pregnant, understandably, you will see a beaded pattern on her cervical mucus. So, as I said, you will have to look into this and look also at verifying whether her missed period is suggestive of a pregnancy, for which you do a pregnancy test. Okay, you can do a urine test, or you can do a serum test. The peak level of human chorionic gonadotrophin, which signifies the pregnancy, as we have told you in our previous lecture, reaches 60 to 70 days when it reaches a peak level of 100 international units per ml. And so this human chorionic gonadotrophin doubles every 2 to 4 days, every 2 days. So halimbawa, 80 units siya ngayon, in 2 days magiging 80, magiging 160. So doubling of HCG is occurring every 2 days, 1.5 every 2 days. And the peak level is reached between 60 to 70 days. And then it starts to plateau, so that by the 16th week of gestation, it has reached its nadir. Okay, we have shown you that when we showed you the graph on the hormones. Now, many times diagnosis of pregnancy is aided by the use of the ultrasound, transvaginal ultrasound. You can see here the appearance on the 4th week of pregnancy of the gestational sac, as you can see here in the arrow. This is done by intravaginal ultrasound, by transvaginal ultrasound, where you can see the gestational sac and the yolk sac, but there is no embryo yet. This is 4 to 5 weeks. By the 5th week, you can see already the yolk sac. Okay, yung maliit na figure doon, yolk sac. By the 6th week of human pregnancy, by ultrasound, transvaginal ultrasound, you can see already the embryo with cardiac activity. You can see the 6th week of pregnancy, you can see the embryo with cardiac activity, and the arrow, the big arrow, points to the yolk sac. Okay? Now, if you look at the crown rump length from the crown of the baby to the rump of the baby, that is what we call CRL, or crown rump length. And it is predictive of gestational age within 4 weeks. So at 12 weeks, you can easily diagnose and give an accurate diagnosis of the age of the baby. As you can see here the head, and you can see here the rump. So the sonologist measures from the crown to the rump, and that indicates the fetal age. And it is most accurate in terms of determining fetal age. So as you can see here in the previous slide that I had showed you, at 12 weeks, the crown rump length is predictive of gestational age. So if you are going to try to detect the gestational age of the embryo, it is best to do a transvaginal ultrasound on the 12th week of gestation. So what are the goals of prenatal care? First, to define the health status of the mother and the fetus, to estimate the gestational age of the fetus, and the obstetrician should initiate a plan for continued obstetrical care. And obstetrical care starts not pre-pregnancy and up to the post-puerperal period, or the postpartum and puerperal period. So what will be the constitution of our diagnosis? How do we define a woman who is pregnant? A newly gravid, a woman who is currently not pregnant and has never been pregnant. Like most of you young girls, you are newly gravid. If you have not been pregnant and if you're currently not pregnant and you have never been pregnant. A gravida, a woman who currently is pregnant or has been in the past, irrespective of outcome. With the establishments of the first pregnancy, she becomes a primary gravida, and with successive pregnancy, she has a multivida. For example, I have a patient, she's gravida 3 para 2. She is currently pregnant on her third pregnancy, and she has delivered 2 term babies, kaya gravida 3 para 2. So if a woman who has never completed a pregnancy, a nullipara is a woman who has never completed a pregnancy beyond 20 weeks gestation, has not been pregnant, or may have had, a woman who has never completed a pregnancy beyond 20 weeks. She may not have been pregnant, or may have had a spontaneous or elective abortion or an ectopic pregnancy. So she's newly gravid, she's pregnant for the first time. She is a nullipara when she has delivered a baby more than 20 weeks of gestation, okay? She may not have been pregnant, but if she had a miscarriage or abortion, or she had an ectopic pregnancy, she is gravida 1 para 0, okay? Primipara is a woman who has delivered only once of a fetus or fetuses if they are twins, born alive or dead, with an estimated duration of 20 weeks or more. So a woman who has been delivered only once of a fetus, she is gravida 1 para 1 if she aborted at 24 weeks, okay? She is pregnant for the first time. She delivered a dead fetus beyond 20 weeks. So she is gravida 1 para 1, okay? In the past, a 500-gram birth weight threshold was used to define parity. The threshold is now controversial. So you look now at the different definitions, okay? A primipara was being delivered only once of a fetus or fetuses, twins, born alive or dead, which is an estimated gestation of 20 weeks or more. On the other hand, a multipara is one who has completed 2 or more pregnancies with gestational ages at least 20 weeks. So I'm gravida 4 para 4 because I've had 4 pregnancies that were all delivered at term. I am a multipara. Parity is determined by the number of pregnancies reaching 20 weeks. Tandaan nyo, parity is determined by the number of pregnancies reaching 20 weeks. It is not increased to a higher number if multiples are delivered in a given pregnancy. Stillbirth does not lower this number. So halimbawa, ang pasyente is gravida 2, para 2. Okay? Then, but she has a twin pregnancy. Okay? So, ang kanyang madideliver, 2 bata. Pero ang number of pregnancies niyan, 20 weeks. She's gravid at 2 para 1. Tapos i-enclose mo sa parenthesis na meron siyang multiples or 2 pregnancies. Okay? So multipara determines the number of women who has delivered fetuses beyond 20 weeks. Okay? So what is the normal duration of pregnancy? It's 280 days or 40 weeks. How do you calculate the duration of her pregnancy? It's calculated from the first day of the last menstrual period. That is the so-called gestational age or menstrual age. Okay? First day of the last menstrual period. And the total and the mature pregnancy has completed 280 days or 40 weeks. How do we compute the expected date of confinement? We use the Naegele's rule. Naegele's rule is you look at the first day of the last menstruation, you add 7 days, then count back 3 months. Halimbawa, ito yung example. Her last menstrual period was October 5. Okay? So you count back 3 months, September, August, July, and add 7 days to the 5. So the expected date of delivery is July 12 of the following year. Do you get it? Halimbawa, ang kanyang last menstruation is June 1. Anong LMP niya? June 1. Count 3 back, 3 months back. May, April, March, plus 1, March, excuse me, the first day of her last menstrual period is June 1. So you count 3 months back. Okay? So it will be May, April, March, plus 7 days, June 8. Dahil June 1 siya nagkaroon. But this is the typical example. Count 3 months back and add 7 days to the figure. So she will now have, if her last menstruation was October, so you count 3 months back, September, August, July, and add 7 to the 5. So expected date of delivery is July 12 of the following year. Now, please remember that ovulatory age or fertilization age is different from age of gestation computed by LMP, because ovulatory age or fertilization age is 2 weeks short of menstrual age. So kung ang menstrual age niya is 8 weeks, ang fertilization age niya is 6 weeks. Okay? Kasi yung menstrual age computed from the first day of the last menstruation. Samantalang yung fertilization age is computed on the day of fertilization, which around the 14th day. Okay? So remember that if you are asked to compute, halimbawa, itong example, ang LMP niya, ang expected date of confinement niya, July 12, ang kanyang age of gestation is, as you can see here, okay? 7 weeks, rather 7 months plus, pag nag-isip ka na, ang age of gestation, halimbawa na lang, ang kanyang age of gestation is 10 weeks. Computed by last menstrual period, ang ovulatory age or fertilization age niya is 2 weeks short, so it's 8 weeks. So 10 weeks gestation age, ovulatory age, 8 weeks. Any problems so far? Are you getting the computations? Are you listening? Can you hear me well?
Yes, Doc.
Yes, Doc.
Okay. Now we divide pregnancies into trimesters, okay? The first trimester extends through a completed 14 weeks. The second trimester is from the 15th week to the 28th week. The third trimester is the 29th week through 42 weeks. Okay? The fourth trimester, as defined by the new edition, is 12 weeks after delivery. This is already the puerperal period or the postpartum period or puerperal period. So remember, First trimester up to 14 weeks, second trimester up to 28 weeks, third trimester up to 42 weeks. And then when the baby has delivered, 12 weeks after delivery is the so-called postpartum period, defined in the new edition as the fourth trimester. So how do you examine a patient who comes to you for prenatal care? You look at her previous and current health status. You ask for her obstetrical history. Mrs., ilan na po ba kayong beses nagbuntis? Ano po ang nangyari sa pagbubuntis nyo? So halimbawa, sasabihin ng pasyente, pangalawa ko na po itong pagbubuntis, nanganak po ako sa kabuanan, buhay naman po ang bata ko. So she is now, delayed po ako ngayon, magto 2 months na po ang tiyan ko. So she is gravid at 2 para 1. So the fourth figures will be 1 full term, 0 abortion, 0 premature, 1 living. That yung obstetrical score niya. Okay? It defines her obstetrical history. So mag-ulit ako. Halimbawa, ang pasyente comes to you, she is pregnant for the 3rd time. So she's gravid at 3 para 2. Okay? So ang kanyang 4 figures or obstetrical score is she has 2 full term, 0 abortion, 0 premature, 2 living. Maliwanag tayo? Gravid at 3 para 2. So it is very important that when you examine a pregnant woman who is seeking consult for a post-pregnancy, that you look at her menstrual history and you ask if the menstrual history is regular, predictable, or it is spontaneous. In other words, she does not take any medicine to induce her menstruation. And you ask her also if she is taking some contraceptive methods, okay? Because the use of contraceptives may favor an implantation of a pregnancy in the fallopian tube or outside of the uterine cavity. And also the menstrual history the LMP may not be very reliable if the woman has been using previously contraceptive pills. Then you do your psychosocial screening. Psychosocial issues are done by medical factors that affect mental and physical health. So you screen for barriers to care, communication obstacles, nutritional status, unstable housing, desire for pregnancy, and safety concerns. Safety in the home environment. Is there evidence of intimate partner violence? Is she a user of social substances that are harmful to the baby? Does she smoke a lot? Does she drink alcohol? Is she in a depressive state? And then you assess your patient on psychosocial issues at least once per semester so that you can identify important issues and reduce pregnancy adverse outcomes. So for cigarette smoking is a no-no in pregnancy because it has been shown by various literatures that cigarette smoking causes subfertility. It increases the rate of miscarriage, stillbirth, low birth weight, and preterm delivery. It increases the risk of placenta previa, abruptio placenta, and premature rupture of the membranes. And of course, heavy smokers will show potential teratogenic effects on their fetuses. So please remember that there will be a no-no, bawal na bawal ang smoking for pregnancy for the outcomes that are adverse to pregnancy and her fetus. So 5 A's for smoking. You ask about smoking at the first and subsequent prenatal visit. You advise with clear, strong statement that explain the risk of continued smoking to the woman, fetus, and outcome. Ask the patient's willingness to attempt stopping smoking and assist with pregnancy-specific self-help smoking cessation materials. May mga materials naman sa clinic that will offer advices against smoking and give adverse effects of smoking for pregnant women. Or you can offer the patient to a smoking, to a non-smoking group like a 100 quit to provide ongoing counseling and support. And of course, to arrange drug smoking abstinence progress at subsequent visits. So you follow them if they have followed your advice in subsequent pregnancies and once you visit your clinic. Another potent teratogen is alcohol because too much intake of alcohol will subject to the fetal alcohol syndrome, where she will suffer most severe forms of these disorders characterized by growth restriction, facial abnormalities, and central nervous system dysfunction. Women who are pregnant or considering pregnancy should abstain from alcoholic beverages. However, social drinking, like having a cup of red wine, is not strictly prohibited, but too much alcohol is strictly forbidden because, as you can see, it's a potent teratogen that causes the fetal alcohol syndrome, characterized by severe forms of facial abnormalities, growth restriction, and central nervous system dysfunction. You also ask for illicit drugs. Is she a marijuana smoker? Is she on opiates? Is she addicted to opiates, amphetamines, barbiturates, heroin? Because these are very important questions. These are social habits that must be stopped during pregnancy, because if continued, these illicit drugs can cause fetal growth restriction, low birth weight, and drug withdrawal soon after birth. Now, management of this, as is mentioned by literature, is that you give these women methadone, 10 to 30 milligram daily, and then titrate, gradually reduce the dose. And you can give buprenorphine alone or in combination with naloxone to help them get out of these social habits of illicit drugs. You look also, when you interview this pregnant woman, you look for evidences of intimate partner violence. May mga pasaba, may black eye ba? And then this intimate partner violence refers to a pattern of assault and coercive behavior that may include physical and psychological abuse, sexual assault, progressive isolation, stalking, intimidation, and reproductive coercion. It's actually a major public health problem and may affect 48% of pregnancy. Hindi ba siya binibigyan ng support? Sinisigawan pa siya lagi? Ginagawa ba siyang sexual slave? Wala bang tiwala sa kanya? Sinusundan siya kahit siya magpunta? Okay? Restricted ang physical activity niya, restricted ang human social relations niya. These are evidences of intimate partner violence. And why are we supposed to look into this and get our pregnant women out of this? Because intimate partner violence has adverse perinatal outcome. It may result in preterm delivery, fetal growth restriction, and fetal death. So at the time of the first visit, at the time of once per trimester, and even in the postpartum period, you have to ask the woman evidences or history of intimate partner violence, or you may ask and do a physical exam on the patient kung makita nyo kung may evidences of trauma on that woman. That's very important. So when you do your first prenatal visit, you do your clinical evaluation. And these are the things that you see on the first visit. Remember, sa first trimester, monthly. Okay. As you can see here, first visit, second. I go back to you for the duration of visit. And please remember this is that I advised on you that you can see here that the frequency of visit will go as frequently as the age of the woman, the woman's pregnancy go up, because in the first month of pregnancy up to the 27th week, you see them only monthly. The second trimester, you see them every 2 weeks, and in the last month of pregnancy, you see them weekly. So these are characteristic of the first visit, the second visit, the third visit, and subsequently weekly from the 36th week and up. You will do a complete physical examination on the first visit, and in every visit, you measure the blood pressure and the maternal weight. You do your pelvic exam and fundal height measurement on the first visit, okay? But subsequent visits, you will now measure the fundic height in every visit of the woman to see if the fetus is growing, because the fundic height more or less indicates the age of pregnancy. Okay? So I repeat, sa first visit, complete lahat ng check-up, including birth weight, blood pressure, pelvic examination. In the subsequent visits, you will do fundic height examination and fetal heart tone position. Every visit yan. That is as far as the fetus is concerned. Now, in the first visit, you usually do a pelvic exam. You look at the external genitalia, and then you get a speculum, do it aseptically, and look at the cervix, the vagina and the cervix. The cervix is supposed to be bluish red because of hyperemia. You may see Nabothean cysts, which are prominent, except not normally dilated, except at the external os. There's no need to be aware or to be alarmed about Nabothean cyst, okay? Then you do a pap smear and specify if the woman is high risk for gonorrhea or has multiple sexual partners. You see discharges that are purulent, foul smelling. Then you have to get specimens for chlamydia trachomatis and Neisseria gonorrhea. We have culture media for these types of cervical infection. You test for chlamydia and Neisseria, which is the most common cause of cervicovaginal infection. Okay. After doing your specular exam under sterile gloves, you do now your bimanual examination. And the bimanual examination now looks at the consistency of the cervix. The normal length of the cervix is 2.5 to 3 centimeters. Its consistency is like the tip of your nose. In pregnancy, the consistency is like the tip, your lips, malambot. Look at the length, it's supposed to be 2.53 centimeters dilated, and it should be closed unless the woman is threatening to go into labor or in labor. Look at the uterus and adnexal size. After which, you do your bony pelvic architecture, determine the ischial spines, the sacral promontory, the sacrosciatic notch, the curvature of the sacrum, and the like. And then you do your vaginal and perineal recognition of any anomalies. And later in pregnancy, when she is already past the first trimester, it is important to know what is the fetal presentation, what part of the fetus presents in the vagina or in the pelvis. In doing your cervical or speculum exam, you should recognize lesions that are on the cervix, vagina, or vulva. And if there are needs for you and you've done your pap smear and there is suggestive of a possible malignant lesion, a colposcopy or a biopsy may have to be done. And if this patient has poor seropollulant discharge and you're suspecting chlamydia or gonococcal infection, then you have to do a culture and sensitivity test of that vaginal discharge. So how do you do your gestational age assessment? Essential for prenatal care, it is essential that you recognize the stage of pregnancy where the woman is and see if she is having an optimal growth development of her fetus. How do you determine that? First of all, menstrual history is best confirmed by first trimester sonography, okay? The best way to determine fetal aging is to do ultrasound in the first trimester because at 12 weeks, the crown rump length predicts very accurately the age of the fetus. And also, you can correlate the uterine size with the last menstrual period as provided by the woman. Well, this is a description that is most familiar to you. When you have a small orange, okay, the age of the pregnancy is around 6 weeks gestation. When you have a large orange, it's 8 weeks. And it's the size of a grapefruit, that's 12 weeks or 3 months. Ang small orange, yung parang dalanghita natin, yung mandarin orange, no? Yung large orange, yung sunkist, okay? And yung grapefruit, mas malaki yung parang suha. And that is already 12 weeks gestation of the size of the uterus. There are laboratory tests that are routinely done at the first visit, okay? And you can see that at the first visit, I have another slide for this, the laboratory exams that you are going to do. But let me do this. So At the time of the first visit, you can see here that you will do a complete blood count, blood typing, including Rh factor, routine urinalysis, midstream urinalysis. You will do CBC, midstream urinalysis, Rh factor. You will request for a fasting blood sugar or a 2-hour glucose tolerance test. You will test for HPV, HIV, and VDRL. So listed here are the laboratory exams that you can see here. Okay, typical incorporation of routine prenatal care. So complete blood count, so check up your blood pressure, weight gain, size of the uterus, fundal height, and fetal heart tones. Then you do your CBC and blood type and Rh factor. You do a pap smear. You do an antibody screen. You do a glucose tolerance test, ultrasound screening in the first trimester to see if there are any neural tube defects. You test for syphilis, VDRL, or RT-PCR. You test also for hepatitis B, and then you test for HIV. Okay, and if need be, tests will be added. Okay. So when you assess the pregnancy for risk assessment, you have to look at conditions which might cause significant problems during the mother's pregnancy, not only to herself, but her fetus as well. So you look for medical history and conditions. Does she have cardiac disease? You classify under New York classification 1, 2, and 3. Does she have diabetes mellitus with evidence of end organ or uncontrolled hyperglycemia? Does she have a family history of genetic abnormalities? Does she have a hemoglobinuropathy? Did she have chronic hypertension? Is she a chronically hypertensive before the age of pregnancy? And is she taking medicines or not? Look at her renal insufficiency if she has serious chronic kidney disease, because if she has on urinalysis showed significant proteinuria, meaning more than equal to or more than 500 milligrams per 24 hour, or her serum creatinine is more equal to or more than 1.5 milligram per deciliter, and she has hypertension, then she has chronic kidney disease. Look at her pulmonary condition. Does she have asthma? Does she have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease? Does she have human immune deficiency virus? Does she have history of deep vein thrombosis? Malalaki ba yung mga varicosities niya? Does she have autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus erythematosus? Did she have surgery before? Is she epileptic? Is she depressed and receiving anticonvulsant? Does she have cancer? And what treatment did she have for her cancer? And then look at her obstetrical history and condition, including, of course, prior or current fetal structural or chromosome. Did she deliver an abnormal baby? Her baby died in utero? Did she lose her baby in the first trimester because of infection or high order twinning pregnancy? Does she have oligohydramnios or polyhydramnios? So how frequent do you render subsequent prenatal visits? Every 4 weeks until 28 weeks, every 2 weeks until 36 weeks, weekly from 36 weeks, every 1 to 2 weeks interval for complicated pregnancies. Now, when there was this smart pandemic of COVID-19 for the last 2.5 years, there were difficulty of women going to this prescribed prenatal visits, and some of them visit just once a month in the first trimester or in the second trimester, or consult sa telemedicine and show pictures of their ultrasound and send by email their laboratory results. But traditionally, this is the sequence of required prenatal visit. Every 4 weeks until the second trimester, every 2 weeks until the third trimester, and weekly from 36 weeks and above. But if she has hypertensive, if she has placenta previa, or she has a complicated pregnancy, having lost several babies before in utero, you have to see her every 1 to 2 weeks. So how about the follow-up visit? What constitutes your prenatal surveillance. So when she comes to you for her first visit, I already stated she must have a complete clinical history, blood pressure, maternal weight, pelvic examination, fundic height, fetal tone, and position. Position sa second trimester na yon. Kasi sa first trimester, wala pa yan. Yung fetal heart tone, you can use your Doppler starting the 10th week or the ordinary stethoscope by the 16th week. For her return visit in the second trimester, 15 to 20 weeks, you must take the blood. In all visits, you will get the weight and the blood pressure of the mother. In every visit, blood pressure and weight of the mother is done. And of course, fundal height examination to determine if the baby is growing normally and determining the position, the presence of the fetal heart rate. Every visit yan and the fetal position. Now, you do not routinely do IE on the second, third visit. You don't only do IE on the first visit, or if the woman complains of vaginal spotting, or it complains of foul odor, vaginal discharge, or complains of watery discharge. But traditionally, your pelvic exam comes in the last trimester when she's about to go to deliver her baby. How do you measure her fundic height? With a bladder that is emptied, you must empty first the bladder before fundal measurement, because it is, you put now the tip of your measuring ruler or your what they call the state measure at the tip of at the most superior portion of the symphysis pubis. Go around the fetus and look for the fundus. Okay, it's measured along the abdominal wall from the top of the symphysis pubis to the top of the fundus, and we use it to measure fetal growth and fetal development. We use it to monitor fetal growth and amniotic fluid volume, because between 20 and 34 weeks gestation, the height of the fundus measured in centimeters correlates closely with gestational age. Please remember that. Between 20 and 34 weeks, fundic height measurement correlates with gestational age. The presence of obesity or presence of uterine masses such as leiomyomas limit fundal height accuracy. So first, you must take note that her bladder is emptied, that she is not obese, that she does not have tumor growth on her uterus. Using fundal height alone, up to a third of cases of fetal growth restriction may be undiagnosed. So there are other parameters by which we measure or see if there is fetal growth restriction, and that is by ultrasound. Now we listen to the fetal heart tones. Many of us have the fetal Doppler. Many of you will have your ordinary stethoscope. So by fetal Doppler, as you can see here in the picture, we can hear the fetal heart tones by 10 weeks. The normal fetal heart tones ranges from 110 to 160 beats per minute. Using your stethoscope, non-amplified stethoscope, fetal heart rate is audible by 20 weeks in majority of women. Sa 20 weeks level ng navel, maririnig niyo yung heartbeat ng mother. Pero pag fetal Doppler, 10 weeks dinig na. By 22 weeks, you can hear the fetal heart sounds as well. Okay? What are these fetal heart sounds? The phoenix shuffle is a sharp whistling sound synchronous with the fetal pulse caused by rush of blood through the umbilical arteries. The uterine shuffle is a soft blowing sound, ganon, synchronous with the maternal pulse produced by the passage of blood through dilated uterine vessels, heard directly and distinctly near the lower uterine portion. So these are the two sounds that you will hear on the abdomen: the phoenix souffle, representing passage of blood through the fetal artery, through the umbilical arteries, and the uterine shuffle, passage of blood through the dilated uterine vessels. A very great aid in managing pregnancy now is the use of this ultrasound, because it provides invaluable information regarding fetal anatomy, growth, and well-being, and it should be performed only for valid medical indications. So I showed you earlier subsequent the initial laboratory test when I mentioned CBC, urinalysis, blood typing, RH typing, HP, fasting blood glucose or 24-hour glucose, HIV immune testing, hepatitis B, rapid test for syphilis, and all these are done pap smear. Of course, if needed, a bacteriologic smear on a cervical discharge. So what are the subsequent laboratory visits? Sa first visit, nakita nyo naman dito sa graph, and you can see it also in your textbook that almost all the laboratory tests are done. Yung determination ng cystic fibrosis is not common about us, but neural tube defect is detected when done in the first trimester, particularly around the 7th to 9th week. The presence of a neural tube disorder might be detected by the presence of a neural echo or in the ultrasound. Okay. In subsequent visits, you may repeat, and you always do your blood pressure, your maternal weight, your fundic height, your fetal heart tones, and the fetal position. And by the subsequent visits, every visit you do fetal heart rate, fetal heart tone, fundic height, position, blood pressure, and weight of the mother. In every visit yan. Okay, in the last trimester, there are certain people who may need chlamydial screening, hepatitis B serology, and group B streptococcal screening. Okay, so these are added procedures for high-risk women that must be done in the last trimester. Why is it necessary to treat group B strep? Why is it necessary to do tests for this condition? Because cultures obtained between 35 and 37 weeks gestation may show group B streptococcal infection, and therefore we can give intrapartum antimicrobial prophylaxis to those who are positive for streptococcal infection. That is why group B streptococcal infection is detected by getting a cervical smear between 35 and 37 weeks. We repeat our gestational diabetes screening kasi they may be negative or normal level in the first trimester, but you do it subsequently in the second trimester. Test again for 2-hour glucose tolerance test. And if this patient has a history of delivering a baby with congenital anomalies or frequently losing their babies, or they have relatives with congenital anomalies, a genetic screening may be done, but it is optional, and the patient can be referred to genetic cancer to clinics that has the facilities for genetic screening. And if determined that she has a carrier, she must be counseled accordingly. Let us do now to nutritional counseling, okay? Look at this slide. This is the total weight gain that is recommended in pregnancy. As you can see, for underweight pregnant women, meaning less than 18.5 pounds, they have to gain 20 to 40 pounds. For those of normal weight in pregnancy, meaning they have an 18.5 to 24.9 weight BMI, their average weight gain should be 25 to 35 pounds. Remember, BMI less than 18.5, 28 to 40 pounds should be gained. For women with a BMI of 18.5 to 24.9, 25 to 35 pounds weight gain throughout in pregnancy. And if they are overweight, meaning they are 25 to 29.9 BMI, only 15 to 25 pounds to be gained. When they are obese, meaning equal to or greater than 30 BMI, then they has to gain only 11 to 20 pounds during the entire duration of pregnancy. Traditionally, when we see a patient with normal weight gain, when we see them gaining 1 pound a week, we are happy about this, 1 pound a week, unless they are overweight or they are obese, in which case we expect them to gain less than 1 pound a week. There is weight retention when the woman has delivered. Most of the extravascular fluid that she has accumulated during pregnancy will be passed out. Okay, as you can see here, the average weight gain for a BMI of what? Normal weight gain 25 to less than 29. Okay, so the average weight gain is 28.6 pounds, 25 to 35 pounds, or 12.9 kilograms. And after delivery, she will lose about 12 pounds or 5.4 kilograms. And in the following week, after the 2 weeks, first 2 weeks post-delivery, she will lose about 12 pounds or 5.5 kilogram. And in the ensuing 2 weeks, she will lose 9 pounds more or 4 kilos. Between 2 weeks and 6 months postpartum, she will lose 5 to 2.5 kilo, 5.5 pounds or 2.5 kilos. And the average retained gait for a pregnancy, magkano yung naiiwang weight sa kanya after a pregnancy, usually averaging 2 pounds. Yun ang retained weight gain ng a woman who has delivered a baby. So excessive weight gain is manifested by accrual fat and may be partially retained as long lumalaki yung puson, naiiwanan sa puson. And more weight gain during pregnancy, the more that was lost postpartum. But please, a woman who breastfeeds will have more loss of weight. So we strongly encourage our woman to breastfeed. The more she breastfed, the less her weight retention. Okay? Now, are we supposed to give vitamins during pregnancy? As you can see here, these are the recommended daily dietary allowances for pregnant and lactating women. We can give them fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. We give them water-soluble vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin B, folate. Folate is very important, vitamin B complex and vitamin C. And then we supplement them with calcium. That's very important starting the second trimester of pregnancy. And then they must have enough sodium, potassium, which are all found in the diet, and we must supplement them with iron. Very important in pregnancy is the supplementation of folic acid, iron, and iodine. And of course, we must make sure that they are receiving sufficient protein, carbohydrate, and fat in their diet. So, how much calories are pregnant women supposed to gain? So first trimester, 0 calories per day pa. Okay? Second trimester, 350 calories per day. And in the third trimester, 452 calories per day. So an addition of 1,000 kilocalories per day or more results in fat accrual. So tingnan natin kung ano yung kinakain nila. Are they overweight or underweight? If they are overweight, we teach them to avoid too fatty foods, too much sugar, and if not too much carbohydrates. But if they have inadequate caloric intake, they will metabolize their proteins because the fetal needs must be met, and they lose weight or they do not gain weight. Okay, so we have to look at their weight gain for every BC and advise them dietary intake accordingly. So as far as proteins are concerned, 1,000 grams are deposited in the second half of pregnancy. Most amino acids fall in maternal plasma. Why? Because if you will remember maternal physiology, placental physiology, the fetus needs this amino acid for its growth and development. And maternal amino acids easily cross the placenta. So it is advisable that pregnant women get an adequate supply of proteins from animal sources such as milk, eggs, cheese, poultry, and fish. Meat, fish, poultry, and egg that will supply them with adequate proteins. Now, are minerals recommended? Now, you can see that we have, I have shown this already in the previous slide, that most of the prenatal vitamins that are available in the market contain only the different vitamins that are enumerated here. Okay? Pag tinignan mo yung multivitamins, meron na yung iron, meron na yung vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin K, lahat ng nakalista dito together with folic acid kasama na rin at zinc nasa prenatal capsule that the women are taking. So if the women are taking this, then they are supposed to be receiving the adequate minerals necessary for pregnancy. Okay, so remember that iron is very important and must be supplemented in pregnancy. Why? Because during pregnancy, 300 milligrams of iron is transferred to the fetus and placenta, 500 milligrams in maternal hemoglobin mass, and therefore at mid-pregnancy, 7 milligrams per day is needed as a iron supplement, or 27 milligram elemental iron. It is advised that the woman takes the iron at bedtime or on an empty stomach so that there will be minimal gastrointestinal reaction. And then you increase the iron supplementation to 60 to 100 milligrams per day if she is obese, if she has multifetal gestation, if she started the iron late in pregnancy, if she is not taking the iron tablet regularly, and anemia. We usually, at the time of the first visit, we already prescribe iron and folic acid to our patients. Give me a minute, please. Okay, so now we go now to iodine. You can see here the iodine requirement. We do not have much of a problem because our bread now is fortified with iodine. And bread products are now fortified with iodized salt. There was a campaign many years back involving one very prominent health secretary who really advocated supplementation of bread and iodine because he noticed cretinism and retarded growth rate among women, among children of women who were not taking iodine supplement. So now we don't worry because we now have iodine in our salt and in our bread. Okay? Now, routine calcium supplementation. Karamihan naman ng prenatal tablets or prenatal capsules of calcium. It is very important because you know that 30 grams of iron is retained and most of it is deposited in the fetus. Therefore, there is increased maternal absorption and retention of calcium. So we give routine supplementation of calcium. We may start it in early trimester or at the mid-trimester of pregnancy because it has been shown that calcium supplementation can prevent hypertensive complications of pregnancy. Give me one second, please, just to rest my throat. Okay. So we now go to zinc and mineral. Please read. Zinc deficiency has also been shown to heal, to result in poor appetite for our pregnant women. Just 1 minute. Therapeutics. With over 20 years of research in men and women's health solutions. Okay. You also have magnesium, and you have to use the see if actually all of these are provided in a healthy diet. Remember that metals like copper, selenium, chromium have important roles in enzyme functions, and most are provided by an average diet. Ito, remember, pag vegetarian ang pasyente, ang kanilang zinc level is low. That is why this vegetarian should be advised to take vitamin B12, okay? And zinc, but the zinc is commonly found in prenatal tablets. Potassium is also given, and fluoride. Are vitamins necessary in pregnancy? Well, it depends upon... Okay. Dali lang ha, isa siya please.
Offers flexible dosing and convenience to patients in all stages.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Class, can you hear me? There is another ongoing. Does it bother you? Hindi naman. Okay. So folic acid is an important supplement during pregnancy because the daily intake of folic acid in the dose of 400 micrograms in a woman will protect her from neural tube defects. And if a woman has delivered a baby with previous neural defect, then the dose of folic acid is important. Remember that folic acid supplementation lowers neural tube defects. High doses of vitamin A should not be given because it can be associated with congenital malformations. However, remember that isotretinoin is a potent teratogen, so don't use it. The main source of vitamin A in our diet are the yellow foods, okay? Papaya, manga, all the like, because they do not, it contains beta carotene. Does not produce. Sandali lang, hanggang maingay eh. Okay. I was saying, talking about vitamin B12 deficiency. Yung mga vegetarians usually have vitamin B12 deficiency. So dapat kumakain sila ng maraming ng supplementation. Does the noise bother you?
Good morning and welcome to the PSR.
Sandali lang ha. I'll just close it ha.
I'm Dr. Federico Torres. We shall begin the day one of the scientific program, starting with the opening ceremonies, which will consist of the PSRM Toxology, National Anthem, PSRM Hymn, and this will be followed by the opening remarks of Dr. Debbie Vaidi Medizo, PSRM President, and the introduction to the course by Professor Emeritus Delia Peewee, Chair of the Scientific Committee.
Okay, am I with you, class? Okay, how about vitamins? Okay, for vitamins, you can take all vitamin B complex, nandun na yan, vitamin B6, vitamin B12, thiamine, pyridoxine, okay? And this patient should be receiving this. As I said, when they buy the prenatal vitamins, all of these components are there, okay? And if they have an adequate diet, these components are there. So just advise them that they are at high risk if they are suffering from, actually vitamin B6, pyridoxine, we give for women with antihistamines, okay? Because it's helpful in nausea and vomiting of pregnancy. Vitamin C supplementation is unnecessary, but usually prenatal capsules have about 50 milligrams vitamin C. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamins. After being metabolized to active form, it boosts the efficiency of intestinal calcium absorption and promotes bone mineralization and growth. It is synthesized indigenously with sunlight exposure. Vitamin D deficiency is common in women with limited sun exposure, yung mga ayaw mainitan. Ito, pag vegetarian ka, deficient ka din sa vitamin D. And so you must have supplementation because the vitamin deficiency can cause disordered skeletal homeostasis, congenital rickets, and fractures in newborn. Any questions so far from the group? Am I too fast for you? Okay lang. So we have to do a pragmatic nutritional surveillance for our women. Advise the pregnant woman to eat food type she wants in reasonable amounts. She eats food that is simply available, especially for socio-economically deprived women. That's where our problem of nutrition in low socioeconomic women. And then we monitor, as I said, every visit, you monitor the weight gain of the mother and advise them whether they are overeating or undereating. And then ask them what food they usually take and advise them on an adequate diet for a pregnant woman, as I've stated, and then limit their salt intake. And remember that simple iron salts will give them elementary iron. Tapos meron na yung iodine, okay? And of course, iodine, so our salt now is iodized. Of course, there's a salt controversy in terms of availability. And then let's check the hematocrit or hemoglobin concentration at 28 to 32 weeks. Is that okay? Can you hear me? Am I adequately heard?
Yes po, Doc.
Thank you. Okay. So by now, in the last few parts of our lecture, common concerns, in the absence of complications, most women can continue to work until labor onset. Some types of labor, some types of work may increase pregnancy complication risk. Risk of preterm birth is likely to moderately increase with standing or working at work for more than 3 hours, lifting and carrying more than 5 kilos, or physically exerting oneself at work. Any occupation that subjects the gravida to severe physical strain should be avoided. No work is continued to the extent that undue fatigue develops. Adequate periods of rest should be provided. So please remember these common concerns, okay? They can be allowed to work, okay? But if that work should not be too tiring, and there should be at least periods of rest in between office hours. Walking is a good exercise. Adequate periods of rest should be advised. Okay, so can pregnant women exercise? Yes, pregnant women can exercise, like moderate exercise like walking 30 to 40 minutes a day. No limit to exercise provided that do not become excessive fatigue or risk injury. Can pregnant women swim? Not at full term when full blown na yung pregnancy niyo, because she might lose her balance. American College of OB/GYN advises a thorough clinical evaluation before recommending an exercise program. In the absence of contraindications, pregnant women are encouraged to engage in regular, moderate intensity physical activity for at least 150 minutes each week. That's 30 to 40 minutes, 3 times a week. Walking, running, swimming, stationary cycling, low impact aerobics are allowed in pregnancy. But pregnant women should refrain from activities with the high risk of falling and abdominal trauma. Baka mahulog sila, baka bumagsakan siya nila. And scuba diving, of course, we do not advise that for pregnant women because of increased risk for decompensation illness among pregnant women. So these are contraindications to exercise in pregnancy when they have significant cardiovascular or pulmonary disease manifested as chest pain, cough pain, or swelling. Cough pain or swelling may indicate that they have thromboembolism. Significant risk for preterm labor if they have undergone cerclage to prevent incompetent cervix, if there is multifetal gestation, if there has been bleeding during pregnancy at any time, if there was threatened preterm labor or ruptured membranes, they should not exercise anymore. And if they have obstetrical complications like hypertension, preeclampsia, they have abnormal bleeding like placenta previa, she is anemic, with poorly controlled diabetes, she is epileptic, morbidly obese, or with fetal growth restriction, we caution against exercise in these types of high-risk pregnancy women. How about what kind of food will they get? Okay, seafoods are excellent source of protein because it's low in saturated fats and contain omega-3 fatty acids. Fish is an important component of our diet, and usually it is so. It's not a problem because mahalang karne ngayon, mahalang manok, kaya most of our pregnant women are eating fish. The recommendation is 8 to 12 ounces of fish weekly, but not more than 6 ounces of albacore or white tuna kasi may mercury yun. Because nearly all fish and shellfish contain trace amounts of mercury, pregnant and lactating women are advised to avoid fish with potentially high methyl mercury levels which include shark, swordfish, king mackerel, and pilefish. We do not encourage pregnant women to eat uncooked foods. Ano ba yun? Yung sashimi, hindi ba uncooked yan? Uncooked tuna, uncooked salmon. As much as possible, we do not advise pregnant women to take those raw food to avoid infection by listeriosis. How about exposure to lead? Halimbawa, pinipintahan yung bahay. Pregnant women should avoid that. If the nursery is being painted, wag muna doon pumasok agad ang bagong or ang buntis na babae, because lead exposure is associated with several adverse maternal and fetal outcomes. The adverse outcomes can be hypertension, miscarriage, low birth weight, and neurodevelopmental impairments. But we do not know at what level of lead exposure will cause these complications. However, the American College of OBGYN recommend. Can you excuse me for a okay? ACOG recommend blood lead testing only if a risk factor is identified. Blood lead levels more than 45 micrograms per deciliter is consistent with lead poisoning and are candidates for chelation therapy. Affected pregnancies are best managed in consultation with lead poisoning experts. We still have a lot of time. Can we take a break of about 10 minutes, class? Would you allow that?
Yes po, Doc.
Because we still have until 9 o'clock. So all of you take a break. I'll just take some coffee, okay? Then I'll come back with the rest of the lecture. Thank you for understanding.
This convention is a culmination of a year-long effort from our members.
Can pregnant women travel? That is a very common question nowadays, that travel restrictions have been lifted. And the answer is yes. Pregnant women can travel, but they're encouraged to wear protective, properly positioned 3-point restraints against automobile accident injury. Okay? So pag nakakotse sila, dapat yung kanilang, what you call that, yung restriction na, restraining attachment should be worn always by them. Air travel can be allowed, but in a properly pressurized aircraft, it has no harmful effect on pregnancy. The American College of OBGYN concluded that in the absence of obstetrical complications, pregnant women can safely fly up to 36 weeks gestation, but should observe the same precautions for air travel as the general population. Like at ngayon, required na ang mask while you are on your trip. Okay? Significant risk with travel, infectious disease acquisition, development of complications remote from healthcare concerns. Ang alam ko sa mga air travel ngayon, masks are still required, but there are some countries which do not, where they are going, which will not require the wearing of masks. Sa atin, it is better to wear masks wherever you are. Is sexual intercourse allowed for pregnant women? The answer is yes, it is allowed in healthy pregnant women. It's not, however, allowed among women who had miscarriage, who are having a threatened abortion, who has been diagnosed with placenta previa, who are manifesting signs of preterm labor or develop early rupture of the membranes or the bag of water. In those instances, coitus is not allowed. Okay? Is dental care to be promoted during pregnancy? And the answer is yes. Teeth examination is included in the prenatal examination. Good dental hygiene is encouraged. Periodontal disease is linked to preterm labor. Dental caries are not aggravated by pregnancy, and pregnancy is not a contraindication to dental treatment. How about doing X-ray of the teeth during pregnancy? it is allowed if it is necessary. The dental clinic usually has an abdominal shield that protects the pregnancy from radiation exposure. So you can have your full dental care during pregnancy. There are common concerns that are asked for by pregnant women. This slide is too small, it's too busy, but this only requires the immunization. What immunization can be given to pregnant women? Okay, so let me just say, pregnant women can receive pneumonia vaccine, can receive influenza vaccine yearly, can receive COVID-19 vaccine, including its boosters, okay? So these are the allowed vaccines during pregnancy. If they are subjected to an animal bite, they can receive tetanus, the TPT, tetanus, diphtheria, toxoid, and they will be given this particular immunization by their corresponding doctors. Okay? Pag nakagat ng aso, and the aso is a stray dog that you do not know if the dog has been vaccinated or not, these pregnant women will receive anti-rabies vaccine, as is the usual doses. Okay, tetanus. As you can see here, we have tetanus prophylaxis during pregnancy. About varicella, we don't have vaccines against chickenpox. So smallpox, we don't give smallpox vaccinations anymore because it's not present anymore in our country. But varicella or chickenpox vaccine is not available. So it is also allowed to give hepatitis A and hepatitis B vaccine in pregnancy. And if a woman gets exposed, if a woman delivers a baby, and the mother is positive for hepatitis B, the baby is immediately given hepatitis vaccine and immunoglobulin. Vaccinated sila kaagad with immunoglobulin plus the hepatitis vaccine. Can pregnant women take coffee? The answer is yes, but limit the intake of coffee to 2 to 3 cups at the most, okay? Because evidence has shown that if you take more than, lalo na yung mga strong coffee, taking it more than 5 cups or 500 milligrams of caffeine daily may raise the risk of miscarriage. So if you take less than 200 milligrams of caffeine that is about 2 to 3 cups daily, then it will cause no significant risk to the fetus as well as to the mother. One common complaint of pregnant women is nausea and heartburn. Mahapdi yung sikmura, masakit yung parang gumagapang na hangin pataas towards the throat. This is a common complaint during the first half of pregnancy. It varies in severity and usually commences between the first and the second bliss period and continue until 14 to 16 weeks of gestation. Tends to be worse in the morning, thus termed morning sickness. What do we give? We advise the women to take small, frequent feedings, okay? To take vitamin B6 with oxylamine. And they can take phenothiazine or H1 receptor blocking antiemetics. We advise these women that after a meal not to lie down so that there will be lesser regurgitation of acid gastric juice to the esophagus. Frequent heartburn is caused by gastric content reflux into the lower esophagus. Frequent regurgitation results from upward displacement and compression of the stomach by the uterus, combined with relaxation of the lower esophageal sphincter. This happens most especially pag malaki na yung tiyan ng mother and has gone beyond the navel. Management should include avoid bending over or lying flat, especially after a meal. Small frequent meals, avoid very hot or very spicy foods, and if they still manifest complaints, it is safe to give them antacids. There are some women who complain of abnormal desire for food, pica. Okay? And if they do these abnormal foods that has no dietary complement, they may suffer from severe iron deficiency kasi baka walang iron composition, yung like chewing uncooked rice or chewing uncooked corns. May mga abnormalities na ganyan eh. And then you advise them to lessen it as much as possible. There are also patients who complains of thialism, na yung naglalaway na maigi. And thialism is profuse libation, usually unexplained, but sometimes appears to follow salivary gland stimulation by starch injection. Merong mga pasyenteng palaging masakit ang ulo. At least 5% of them are estimated to be complicated by new onset or new type headache. So we give them acetaminophen. It is not contraindicated in pregnancy. And to advise them to avoid the triggers that precipitate their headache. Halimbawa, kung mainit ang araw at saka sila sasakit ang ulo, then avoid such, or they see somebody who is irritable to them and they develop a headache, then avoid those people, okay? And of course, a very common complaint, especially from the 2nd to the 3rd trimester, is backache. Alam naman ninyo ang pasyente, pag malaki na yun siya, nakaliyad na. So they're quite lordotic, right? And this low back pain may be encouraged by excessive bending, lifting, or walking. Usually, these ailments are explained of by most women, lalo pag nasa last trimester na ng pregnancy. We advise them to squat rather than bend. Halimbawa, they drop something on the floor. They should not bend. They should squat and pick that up when reaching down. Also, we advise them to use a back support pillow when sitting. And of course, avoiding high-heel shoes during pregnancy. Baka matapilok pa, mabalian pa. Okay? Back pain complaints increase with progressing gestation. And it is more commonly complained of by women who are overweight, obese, or a prior history of low back pain. Even before they were pregnant, they were already having low back pain. Uncommon causes of backache in pregnancy is the presence of osteoporosis, disc disease, vertebral osteoarthritis, or septic arthritis. Okay? But this can be managed accordingly. We still go to backache kasi ito yung karaniwang complaint ng buntis, lalo na yung nasa 3rd trimester na. Common causes, muscular spasm and tenderness, such as acute strain or fibrosis. Pag ganito, nagbibigay lang ako ng local applicant. Meron kasi tayo mga local gel for pain relief, or we can give them safe muscle relaxants, okay? And it will offer them relief. Like as I said here, acetaminophen, NSAIDs. But NSAIDs should not be used so much because it can cause fetal effects. So paisa-isa, paminsan-minsan, okay lang. And we can give them muscle relaxant, cyclobenzapine, baclofen, okay? And then we give them stabilizing and strengthening exercises and support belt to stabilize the sacroiliac joint. Ako, ang karaniwang binibigay ko is Norgesic for back pain. And when it has paracetamol also, it's Norgesic Forte. And it helps them for muscle cramps and for backache. Okay? Sometimes, if it's too extreme, I advise them to go for physical therapy. Another common concern are the presence of varicosities. Okay? Vulvar varicosities usually is hereditary, and it frequently coexists with leg varicosities. For leg varicosities, we can advise them to use support stockings and frequent elevation of the legs. For vulvar varicosities, some use well-fitted pantyhose, form rubber pads suspended across the vulva by a belt. Pero karamihan yung fitted pantyhose helps already in the leg varicosities and the vulvar varicosities. Hemorrhoids are a very common concern of pregnant women. If they are asymptomatic, in other words, it's not swollen, it's not bleeding, it's not painful, we do not have to give anything because that will immediately regress in size after delivery. So rectal vein varicosities may first appear during pregnancy as pelvic venous pressure rise because of the compression of the enlarged uterus on the inferior vena cava. 40% of pregnant women develop hemorrhoids. If the hemorrhoid is asymptomatic, as I said, hindi nadudugo, hindi namamaga, hindi masakit, you don't have to do anything. But if there is pain and swelling, you can give topically applied anesthetics, warm soaps, and stool softening agents. Okay, you can give them Dulcolax or Senocot, okay, and topically applied anesthetics. And they can even sit down or on warm hot seat bath. For patients who develops thrombosis of an external hemorrhoid, we call a surgeon to excise and remove the clot, and then followed by injection with local anesthetics. How about the problem of sleeping and fatigue? In early pregnancy, many experience fatigue and need greater amounts of sleep. The soporific effect of progesterone may be compounded in the first trimester by nausea and vomiting. Latter stages, general discomfort, urinary frequency, ihi ng ihi sa gabi, nahirapang huminga kung hindi magpapalit ng posisyon. Yun ang some causes of disturbed sleep among pregnant women. And there can be more, we have to help them with that because sleep breathing morbidities can cause hypertensive disorders of pregnancy, stillbirth, and preterm delivery. So how do we manage sleeping and fatigue? We allow them daytime naps if they are not working mothers. They can sleep during the day and then give them mild sedatives such as diphenhydramine. Okay, yung antihistaminics, nakakaantok na rin yan eh. Okay, like Benadryl. Okay. So another common concern, we're about to finish our lecture and I will have some minutes for questions and answers from you. Okay. We are now, it is now available in our country, the so-called cord blood banking. Because with cord blood banking, we get the stem cell from the delivered fetus and preserve it because cord blood contains hemopoietic. We get it from the umbilical cord. The cord blood is taken from the umbilical cord and it contains hemopoietic stem cells that are used to treat more than 70% of diseases, including immunological genetic diseases and some forms of cancer. In public banks, they promote allogenic donation for use by a related or unrelated recipient, similar to blood product donation. Dito sa atin, wala tayong public banks for cord blood banking, but we have private banks. So during prenatal care, either the obstetrician or the patient initiates already the discussion or the desire for cord blood banking. And then if the couple sincerely desires this, pag malapit na silang manganak, yung private bank delivers already the equipments and the storage kit for the collected blood in the delivery room, so that when the woman delivers, it's already there. And soon after, the collector agents of the private banks get this blood. And the cost is quite prohibitive. I think it's 6,000 at the initial collection, and subsequent cost will be determined by those saving the cord blood and the blood bank. They store stem cells from cord blood for future autologous use, and they charge fees for initial processing. Yung collection niya, may charge na yan, I think mga 6,000 eh. And the annual storage, which is very costly. But we have the facilities now for cord banking in our country. So with that, I have finished my lecture with you. If there is any part of the lecture that you would like me to repeat on, please feel free to ask. We still have a few minutes for our lecture. So I'm putting it back. So I'm flashing it back so that if along my flashing you have any complaint, I will explain. If you do not have any question on the slide, I will not remark. But if you have any question on the slide, then I will explain. Is that clear to the class? Okay. I'll give you time to read. You are free to question me on any slide. This is very important for you to remember. The detection of ultrasound age should be done in the first trimester, particularly from the 9th to the 12th week. And by the 12th week, if you get your crown ramp lung, it is predictive of an adequate or correct gestational age. Remember that if you do your ultrasound before the 6th week, you may not be able to perceive the fetal heart rate. But if you do it from 6 weeks and above, the sonologist will already show the presence of heartbeat. This is what is illustrated as a crown ramp length. Tingnan nyo ito, itong arrow ko ha. Ito yung sinatawag na nuchal translucency. Pag may nakitang nuchal translucency, they watch the baby for possible chromosomal defects. So you should determine the health of the mother as well as the fetus in all subsequent visits. And I have defined for you the different terminologies to determine the parity status of pregnant women. I also taught you how to calculate on the estimated age of gestation and the expected date of delivery. I showed you the duration of the different trimesters of pregnancy, how to get obstetrical, menstrual history, and all relevant factors like contraceptive use, psychosocial issues, and use of habits like cigarette smoking, alcohol intake, which are all have adverse effects in pregnancy, particularly too much of alcohol, and also the use of illicit drugs should be elicited because they have definite withdrawal effects on the fetuses. You should look at every visit from the first to the last visit, any possible intimate partner violence, whether physical or verbal. You do your complete laboratory exams on the first visit. Every visit, you check for fetal heart rate, starting the 2nd trimester or in the late 1st trimester. Then from the 2nd trimester and up, you determine maternal weight, blood pressure, fundic height, fetal position, fetal heart rate, and fetal presentation. You do your speculum exam on the first visit, only on the first visit. You repeat your speculum exam only when there is a need to do so, especially if there is evidence that you develop infection during her pregnancy or she starts to bleed. Okay, this is how you do your pelvic examination, and this is how to estimate by internal exam the age of gestation. I said mandarin orange, regular Sankey's, and then grapefruit sizes. I also mentioned to you the routine laboratory exams that must be done. Please remember that anti-D screening should be done either on the first visit or on this later second trimester. And if they are found to be Rh negative, they should receive anti-ROGAM the first 3 days post-delivery, if they did not receive it prior to delivery. And then I gave you schedules of subsequent prenatal visit and what to look at in subsequent prenatal visits, okay? And then I taught you the significance of the fundic height and advised that that the patient should empty the bladder before measuring the fundic height from the top of the symphysis pubis to the dome of the uterus. A correlation of 20 to 34 weeks of centimeters, 20 to 34 weeks of gestation correlates with the fundic height measurement of 20 to 34 weeks. Okay, I also showed you that using a Doppler, you can hear fetal heart tones by 10 weeks, but by your ordinary stethoscope, you can hear it by about 20 to 22 weeks. Ultrasound is a very good device for managing our pregnant women, both complicated and uncomplicated. And I also showed you your subsequent laboratory exams, particularly for women who are anemic or for women who had urinary tract infection. They should have culture and sensitivity tests and follow-up determination if their anemia or if their urinary tract infection have been controlled. Now, for patients suspected to have group B streptococcal infection, we repeat the smear at 35 and to 37 weeks and correct if present with antimicrobial prophylaxis before the woman goes into labor. We repeat testing for diabetes on the 24th to the 28th week, that's the second trimester, and genetic screening is optional, okay? We showed you that the normal weight gain for an average, for a normal weight pregnant woman, meaning her weight is between 18.5 to 24.9. The average weight gain for the entire duration of pregnancy is 25 to 35 pounds. We also told you that most of this weight gain is lost by the woman, so that at the end of 6 months, only about 2 pounds or 1 kilo is retained in her body. I also showed you that most prenatal vitamins for pregnant women contain all the necessary fat-soluble, water-soluble vitamins and the minerals. I inform you of the necessity of getting an adequate caloric intake per day for the pregnant woman's fetus to develop normally, and this is composed of adequate proteins, carbohydrates, and I emphasize that folic acid and iron are must as a supplement in pregnancy, because folic acid can prevent neural tube defects, and iron is lost in pregnancy, going to the mother, to the fetus, and to the placenta. So it is necessary that you give 60 to 150 milligrams per day if the patient is anemic, or at least 7 milligrams per day if she's not anemic. Iodine is usually found in our iodized salt and bread. Calcium is a must to be supplemented, starting for high-risk women in the first trimester, because it is needed for maternal absorption and bone deposition in the fetus and mother, as well as it's preventive against preeclampsia in high-risk women if you start calcium supplementation in the second or first trimester of pregnancy. And I mentioned already folic acid, and I mentioned that most of the vitamin B complex are found together with vitamin A, that should not be excessive vitamin A taking because it can also cause toxicity. And remember that when you are dealing with a vegetarian woman, she has to receive supplementation of vitamin B12 because she will have deficiency of that if she is purely vegetarian, okay? These are pyridoxine, vitamin B6, is usually combined with doxylamine for management of nausea and vomiting in pregnancy. So you can see here, advise the pregnant to eat as much as you want of the food that she deserves. She must monitor her weight gain and align her life activities with the recommendations that you gave. And of course, take simple salts that provide at least 30 milligrams of elemental iron, and provide iodine as it is in iodized salt and iodized bread. And recheck the hemoglobin hematocrit at 28 to 32 weeks and correct if there's still anemia. She can go to work as long as it is not causing undue physical stress on her. She can exercise moderately except when she is bleeding, when she has bleeding complications of pregnancy, a history of preterm labor, multifetal gestation, and congestive heart conditions or severe chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Limit her intake of deep seafood because of the presence of minerals. Okay. Lead screening, avoid a newborn child or a pregnant woman staying in a newly painted house because she might be exposing herself and her fetus to lead. She can travel with safety. Pregnant patients are allowed to travel until 36 weeks of pregnancy. She can have coitus except when she is bleeding, when she has ruptured membrane, when she has preterm labor or premature labor. Dental care is allowed in pregnancy, and you encourage immunization against pneumonia, influenza, COVID-19 vaccine, anti-tetanus, tetanus toxoids, hepatitis B vaccines, and what they call that, if she has been exposed to hepatitis or hepatitis A. Toxoids, okay. So with that, I gave you advice that you can take only about 3 to 4 cups of coffee a day. That for nausea and heartburn, she can take antacids, and advise her not to lie flat on bed, not to take too spicy or too hot drinks, and of course, nothing that will compress her stomach. Headaches are usually relieved by simple acetaminophen, and backaches can be relieved by support pillows, avoiding high heel shoes, and some undergo massage at the back and take medications that will relieve her pain. And of course, varicosities are common. She can use support stockings, elevation of the legs whenever possible. We do not do surgery on varicosities during pregnancy. Okay, we encourage enough hours of sleep, at least 8 or 9 hours of sleep. And with that, I have summarized for you once again prenatal care. And unless you have questions, you may leave now or stay until 9 o'clock. Leave the forum at 9 o'clock.